Hello, this video is on dating the book of Galatians. Let me share my screen. Okay, Paul's letter to the Galatians. The picture there is a map showing the region of Galatia in the middle, and it's sort of central to where modern Turkey is today. And this was important because this is where Paul went. It's a region where he went along with Silas on his first missionary journey. On the letter to the Galatians, this is one of the letters that everybody pretty much agrees that Paul is the author of this letter. There's no significant dispute on that point for this letter. And this chart I've been showing on all the letters of Paul because it really shows the timeline of Paul's life as well as when I believe all the letters were written. And if you can look at the list up there on the top left, you'll see that Galatians at 49 AD, the one we're talking about right now, was, I believe, the very first one. And so let's discuss why. This is the sequence of events. Paul and Silas founded the Galatian churches on their first missionary journey. It's not too terribly far from Antioch, from where they left, and that's the first place they went. It was around 47 to 48 AD. After that, there were some Jewish believers who we have come to call Judaizers, and they followed after Paul and taught that the Galatian Christians must be circumcised and follow the law of Moses. Now, this is that the Gentile Galatians who had converted must be circumcised and follow the law of Moses. And in doing that, really what that was saying is that in order to become a Christian, you had to convert and become a Jew first. So you had to become part of Judaism before you could become part of Christianity. Paul vigorously disagreed with that, and it prompted him to write this letter. The controversy on that topic will eventually lead to a big meeting called the Jerusalem Council that's described in the book of Acts chapter 15. And that Jerusalem Council occurred about 49 AD. When they had that council, that was the question that came before the council. What about these Gentile believers? Do they have to be circumcised? Do they have to follow the whole law of Moses? Do they have to become Jews first to become Christians? Peter and Paul both argued against that. Peter, based on his experience earlier in Acts with Cornelius, the Roman centurion, and Paul also based on his experience and what the Lord had revealed to him. James, writing for the council, determined in favor of the position of Peter and Paul that Gentiles did not have to become Jews and follow the whole law of Moses or be circumcised. He does write a letter saying that, along with some guidelines that he wanted them to follow that would aid in joint fellowship between Jewish and Gentile believers. The Jerusalem Council had direct bearing on the issue of the Galatians, but it also had great authority, but Paul doesn't mention it in his letter of Galatians. And I think the reason he doesn't mention it is because it hadn't happened yet. Now, I probably should say something. That is really the main thing we need to know in order to date the book of Galatians, but I think I need to say something about the timeline that Paul provides himself. Other than the book of Acts, the first couple chapters of Galatians are about the only place in the New Testament you can get any kind of a timeline of what happened after Christ's death and resurrection. And in it, Paul mentions that he went to Jerusalem after 3 years. That's in Galatians 1:18. And I think that's describing an event that took place in Acts 9, beginning in verse 26. That after 3 years, I think, is to be understood as 3 years after he was converted. And then later it says Paul returned to Jerusalem after 14 years, and that's Galatians 2:1, and that matches with Acts 11:30. And when that happened, he goes with Barnabas and Titus. Now, I am reading that as the first verse is talking about 3 years after his conversion, and the second one is 14 years after his conversion. You could do that differently. You could try to sum those together and say, really, that makes 17 years. And that would be an understandable way to read it. I think some people may want to read it that way. I have decided not to read it that way. Not 3 plus 14 equals 17, but the second one is really referring to 14 years after his conversion. If it really was 17 years, it's a little bit hard to squeeze 17 years in between the letter to the Galatians and Christ's crucifixion. And so that would be a little bit of a problem there. So in conclusion, I believe that Galatians was written in 49 AD, just before the Jerusalem Council. And that would make this the first letter of Paul that was written that's shared and remains in our New Testament. So that's the story on Galatians. Thank you for watching, and I hope to be back soon with another video.